The book of Esther, chapter 8. That day King Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman, enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther, and Mordecai was admitted to the king's presence, for Esther had revealed his relationship to her. The king removed his signet ring that he had taken away from Haman and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther put Mordecai in charge of the house of Haman. The Jewish victory in the Feast of Purim. The second royal decree. Esther again spoke to the king. She fell at his feet and tearfully implored him to revoke the harm done by Haman and Agagite and the plan he had devised against the Jews. The king stretched forth the golden scepter to Esther, so she rose and, standing before him, said, "If it seems good to the king, and if I have found favor with him, if the thing seems right to the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let a document be issued to revoke the letters that the schemer Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, wrote for the destruction of the Jews in all the royal provinces. For how can I witness the evil that is to befall my people, and how can I behold the destruction of my kindred?" King Ahasuerus then said to Queen Esther and to the Jew Mordecai, "Now that I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have impaled him on the stake, because he was going to attack the Jews, you in turn may write in the king's name what you see fit concerning the Jews, and seal the letter with the royal signet ring. For a decree written in the name of the king and sealed with the royal signet ring cannot be revoked." At that time, on the 23rd day of the third month, Sivan, the royal scribes were summoned, exactly as Mordecai dictated. They wrote to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and officials of the 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia, to each province in its own script, and to each people in its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. These letters, which he wrote in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the royal signet ring, he sent by mounted couriers riding thoroughbred royal steeds. In these letters the king authorized the Jews in each and every city to gather and defend their lives, to destroy and kill and annihilate every armed group of that nation or province that might attack them, along with their wives and children, and to seize their goods and spoil. On a single day throughout the provinces of King Ahasuerus, the 13th day of the 12th month Adar. Esther Chapter E. The following is a copy of the letter the great King Ahasuerus to the governors of the provinces in the 127 satrapies from India to Ethiopia, and to those who are loyal to our government. Greetings. Many have become more ambitious the more they were showered with honors through the bountiful generosity of their patrons. Not only do they seek to do harm to our subjects, but incapable of dealing with such greatness, they even begin plotting against their own benefactors. Not only do they drive out gratitude from among humankind, but with the arrogant boastfulness of those to whom goodness has no meaning, they suppose they will escape the stern judgment of the all-seeing God. Often, too, the fair speech of friends, entrusted with the administration of affairs, has induced many placed in authority to become accomplices in the shedding of innocent blood, and has involved them in irreparable calamities. By deceiving with malicious slander the sincere good will of rulers. This can be verified in the ancient stories that have been handed down to us, but more fully when you consider the wicked deeds perpetrated in your midst by the pestilential influence of those undeserving of authority. We must provide for the future, so as to render the kingdom undisturbed and peaceful for all people, taking advantage of changing conditions and always deciding matters coming to our attention with equitable treatment. For instance, Haman, son of Hammedatha, a Macedonian, certainly not of Persian blood, and very different from us in generosity, was hospitably received by us. He benefited so much from the goodwill we have toward all people that he was proclaimed our father, before whom everyone was to bow down, and he attained a position second only to the royal throne. But unable to control his arrogance, he strove to deprive us of kingdom and of life, and by weaving intricate webs of deceit, he demanded the destruction of Mordecai, our savior and constant benefactor, and of Esther, our blameless royal consort, sort together with their whole nation. For by such measures he hoped to catch us defenseless, and to transfer the rule of the Persians to the Macedonians. But we find that the Jews, who were doomed to extinction by this arch-criminal, are not evildoers, but rather are governed by very just laws, and are the children of the Most High, the living God of majesty, who has maintained the kingdom in a flourishing condition for us and for our forebears. You will do well, then, to ignore the letter sent by Haman, son of Hammedatha, for he who composed it has been impaled together with his entire household before the gates of Susa. Thus swiftly has God, who governs all, brought just punishment upon him. You shall exhibit a copy of this letter publicly in every place to certify that the Jews may follow their own laws, and that you may help them on the day set for their ruin, the 13th day of the 12th month, Adar, to defend themselves against those who attack them. For God, the ruler of all, has turned that day from one of destruction of the chosen people into one of joy for them. Therefore, you too must celebrate this memorable day among your designated feasts with all rejoicing, so that both now and in the future it may be a celebration of deliverance for us and for Persians of goodwill. But for those who plot against us, a reminder of destruction, every city and province without exception that does not observe this decree shall be ruthlessly destroyed with fire and sword, so that it will be left not merely untrodden by people, but even shunned by wild beasts and birds forever. Esther chapter 8 continued. A copy of this letter to be promulgated as law in each and every province was published among all the people, so that the Jews might be prepared on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. Couriers mounted on royal steeds sped forth in haste at the king's order, and the decree was promulgated in the royal precinct of Susa. Mordecai left the king's presence, clothed in a royal robe of violet and of white cotton, with a large crown of gold and a mantle of fine crimson linen. The city of Susa shouted with joy, and for the Jews there was splendor and gladness, joy and triumph. In each and every province and in each and every city wherever the king's order arrived, there was merriment and joy, banqueting and feasting for the Jews, and many of the peoples of the land identified themselves as Jews, for fear of the Jews fell upon them. Esther chapter 9. The massacre reversed. When the day arrived on which the order decreed by the king was to be carried out, the 13th day of the 12th month Adar, on which the enemies of the Jews had expected to overpower them, the situation was reversed. The Jews overpowered those who hated them. The Jews mustered in their cities throughout the provinces of King Ahasuerus to attack those who sought to do them harm, and no one could withstand them, for fear of them fell upon all the peoples. Moreover, all the officials of the provinces, the satraps, governors, and royal procurers, supported the Jews out of fear of Mordecai, for Mordecai was powerful in the royal palace, and the report was spreading through all the provinces that he was continually growing in power. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them. They did to those who hated them as they pleased. In the royal precinct of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 people. They also killed Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Paratha, Adalia, and Aridatha, Parmashta, Irsai, Aridai, and Vajatha. The 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the foe of the Jews, however, they did not engage in plundering. On the same day, when the number of those killed in the royal precinct of Susa was reported to the king, he said to Queen Esther, "In the royal precinct of Susa the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 people, as well as the 10 sons of Haman. What must they have done in the other royal provinces? You shall again be granted whatever you ask, and whatever you request shall be honored." So Esther said, "If it pleases your majesty, let the Jews in Susa be permitted again tomorrow to act according to today's decree, and let the 10 sons of Haman be impaled on their stakes." The king then gave an order that this be done, and the decree was published in Susa. So the 10 sons of Haman were impaled, and the Jews in Susa mustered again on the 14th of the month of Adar, and killed 300 people in Susa. However, they did not engage in plundering. The other Jews who dwelt in the royal provinces also mustered and defended themselves, and obtained rest from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but they did not engage in plunder. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar, the feast of Purim. On the 14th of the month they rested, and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. The Jews in Susa, however, mustered on the 13th and 14th of the month, but on the 15th they rested and made it a day of joyful banqueting. That is why the rural Jews who dwell in villages celebrate the 14th of the month of Adar as a day of joyful banqueting, a holiday on which they send food to one another. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews, both near and far, in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. He ordered them to celebrate every year both the 14th and the 15th of the month of Adar, as the days on which the Jews obtained rest from their enemies, and as the month which was turned from them from sorrow into joy, from mourning into celebration. They were to observe these days with joyful banqueting, sending food to one another and gifts to the poor. The Jews adopted as a custom what they had begun doing and what Mordecai had written to them. Epilogue: The Rise of Mordecai. Summary of the story. Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the foe of all the Jews, had planned to destroy them and had cast the pur, or lot, for the time of their defeat and destruction. Yet, when the plot became known to the king ordered in writing that the wicked plan Haman had devised against the Jews should instead be turned against Haman, and that he and his sons should be impaled on stakes. And so these days have been named Purim, after the word pur. Thus, because of all that was contained in this letter, and because of what they had witnessed and experienced in this event, the Jews established and adopted as a custom for themselves, their descendants, and all who should join them, the perpetual obligation of celebrating these 2 days every year in the manner prescribed by this letter, and at the time appointed. These days were to be commemorated and kept in every generation, by every clan, in every province, and in every city. These days of Purim were never to be neglected among the Jews, nor forgotten by their descendants. Esther and Mordecai act in concert. Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote to confirm with full authority this second letter about Purim, and Mordecai sent documents concerning peace and security to all the Jews in the 127 provinces of Ahasuerus' kingdom. Thus were established for their appointed time these days of Purim, which Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had designated for the Jews, just as they had previously enjoined upon themselves and upon their descendants the duty of fasting and supplication. The command of Esther confirmed these prescriptions for Purim and was recorded in the book. Esther Chapter 10. The rise of Mordecai completed. King Ahasuerus levied a tax on the land and on the islands of the sea. All the acts of his power and valor, as well as a detailed account of the greatness of Mordecai, whom the king promoted, are recorded in the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. The Jew Mordecai was next in rank to King Ahasuerus, in high standing among the Jews, popular with many of his kindred, seeking the good of his people and speaking out on behalf of the welfare of all its descendants. Esther Chapter F. Mordecai's dream fulfilled. Then Mordecai said, "This is the work of God. I recall the dream I had about these very things, and not a single detail has been left unfulfilled. The tiny spring that grew into a river, and there was light and sun and many waters. The river is Esther, whom the king married and made queen. The 2 dragons are myself and Haman. The nations are those who assembled to destroy the name of the Jews. But my people is Israel, who cried to God and was saved. The Lord saved his people and delivered us from all these evils. God worked signs and great wonders, such as have not occurred among the nations. For this purpose he arranged 2 lots, one for the people of God, ranged the second for all of the other nations. These 2 lots were fulfilled in the hour, the time, and the day of judgment before God, and among all the nations God remembered his people and rendered justice to his inheritance. Gathering together with joy and happiness before God, they shall celebrate these days on the 14th and 15th of the month Adar throughout all future generations of his people Israel. Colophon. In the 4th year of the reign of Ptolemy and Cleopatra, Dositheus, who said he was a priest and Levite, and his son Ptolemy brought the present letter of Purim, saying that it was genuine, and that Lysimachus, son of Ptolemy of the community of Jerusalem, had translated. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. God bless you.